Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is a round 2 game from the 2016 Candidates Tournament between Sergey Karjakin playing on the white end and Hikaru Nakamura. Both players enter this round with a half a point in the tournament standings. Let's see how things would play out in this one. Karjakin opened with d4, Nakamura replying knight f6, c4 e6, knight f3 b6. This is the Queen's Indian defense. g3, and now bishop a6. Why a6? We play b6 to fianchetto, typically. Not here, though. Why not? This is a move we may identify as some opening finesse or an opening subtlety. Not the only one we see in this game. Black's very next move is one we may, too, identify as an opening finesse. What is the story behind it? In order to better understand this move, let us have a look at White's last move and see what it is doing. It is preparing to fianchetto the light square bishop. Guess who is the most efficient or natural defender of the c4 square? Not the c4 pawn, the c4 square, who happens to have a pawn on it. It's the light square bishop. He has a different idea in mind. He's soon not going to be on this diagonal to defend c4. This is what may provoke the black side to pinpoint c4, anticipating that this is a soft point in the white position. Regardless of how white replies to the bishop a6 move, they are inconvenienced in some way. How does white reply? In the game, it was b3. What has black gained by inducing this move? Well, the a3 and c3 squares are now permanently weakened. They are gaps in the white position, holes within the white queen side. Is this something that black could take advantage of? Who knows? We don't know. I can't help but be reminded of a movie right now. This is going to sound a little bit weird that this opening right here, the Queen's Indian defense, this bishop a6 idea, is reminding me of a movie right now. The movie Any Given Sunday, where Al Pacino is in the locker room giving a speech to his team who is down. One of the lines in that speech is, "The inches we need are everywhere." And if you substitute that word inches with weaknesses, is really what we have going on in this chess position. In this opening, this idea with bishop to a6, or more generally, in a chess game, in these top-level games, we have players here fighting for every inch, every little detail, every little weakness in a position. They are trying to gain as much as possible, squeeze as much as they can from a chess position. Will it add up, all of these little details? Maybe if you accumulate enough, yes, they will, creating the weaknesses on a3 and c3. Who knows, one day maybe the bishop makes use of a3. Maybe a minor piece of black's one day arrives on c3. They're fighting for every inch at these top-level games. They're really looking at these smaller, finer points in the game and trying to get as much out of any given position. b3 was not the only option. Just to point out one other detail, if the knight plays here to defend, white is also inconvenienced in some way. This gives black some insight about the dark square bishop. There's no fear of him coming out along this diagonal anytime soon, and taking it one step further, if the pawn is planted on d5, this knight is now really well restricted. I could share more, but I gotta stop somewhere. b3 was played in the game. Bishop b4, another opening finesse. This disrupts the queenside minor pieces in some way. The black bishop now returns. He's a little bit misplaced. Now that b3 has been played, bishop really doesn't want to be on d2. He would much rather play on this main diagonal. Okay, and also the knight can't make use of d2 anymore. This now, actually the combination of both a6, bishop a6, and this bishop b4 idea, they kind of are tied together in a way. Bishop a6 provoked b3. Bishop to b4 provoked bishop d2, and he's not around to watch over the a3 square, so maybe this is starting to be a possibility at some point, especially if the c-file at some point opens up. This would be a really nice square for the bishop to get to. He would control an important pivot square for a white major piece. See how things are being tied together here, these little details, both bishop moves, these opening finesses, how they might work together in a chess game. Anyhow, follow up bishop g2, d5. Yeah, another additional point with bishop a6 is that the combined effort of both bishop and pawn on the c4 square is helping to do what? Resolve this tension in the center immediately. Whereas if there wasn't some immediate pressure on c4, maybe white can simply sit and keep the tension. This tension is immediately resolved. C takes D, E takes D. Some more natural stuff coming in. Castles, castles. Knight c3. Knight b to d7. Some more development with queen c2. Half open file for black. Rook f to d1. A little reposition for the knight. He's looking at the e6 square. Strong square for a knight. A very flexible piece from e6. Does many things. Pressure on d4. Facilitates a c5 strike. Maybe he drifts someday over towards the king side. Knight e5. Improve the knight position. The bishop can now c. Now the bishop is returning. There's a gap on c6, and this is being covered. He did his job on a6. He provoked some weaknesses. He's now returning to the main diagonal, lending support to d5, watching c6. And now white is underdeveloping, returning to the b2 square. Knight e6, bishop b2, bishop d6. And now we just have white solidifying their center with e3. Black is covering the b5 square, so there is not going to be knight b5. Secures the bishop's post. Knight e2. And now we have c5. Up until this point, it's pretty much a dead equal position. This knight e2 move may look a little bit awkward. What is the idea behind it? It's anticipating a structural change. It is anticipating this c5 pawn break. And white wants to be in a position to make use of the d4 square. White also wants to see the e5 square with the bishop. The knight is getting out of the bishop's way so that the bishop is there to indirectly defend the knight. So that on a move like c5, which is played next, you can capture and your knight is defended. So this is what is played. We did have knight to e2 in the game, and black immediately strikes in the center with c5. Seems perfectly reasonable. However, in the computer's eyes, there is some shift with this pawn break. It's not the top move. It's pretty even at this stage again, but with c5, a little something is given away. Computer is not such a fan of c5. Why not? Well, this is what happens in the game. We had d takes c, knight takes c, and white has really good pieces. Black now has an isolated pawn, and the square d4 is a great jumping point for the white minor pieces, the bishop, the knight, the rook. Any of them can make use of that square at some stage. White has good control. This is another way to look at it. White has good control over the very square you would want to have control over when fighting against an isolated pawn. Isolated d5 pawn here. You want to have control over the d4 square. You want to make sure that that pawn can't advance at any moment. White has good control in an isolated pawn structure, is what I'm getting at. The other option is after c5 takes, if black is taking like this, well, there's going to be some pressure. This is a hanging pawn structure. This may be difficult for black to defend against as well. However you slice it, there's going to be some target for white. White will be able to target one of the black pawns because of this c5 move. What is something better? After knight to e2, in the computer's eyes, c6 is a better move. And this is one that I really had to consider some, because I don't know, I didn't understand why you would do this. It seems like you have to eventually go for some active strike. You can't just be sitting here for forever. This seems like the only active pawn break, but there is some value in not being so quick to pull the trigger on this c5 break. You could make this c6 move, and your ensuing moves, you're kind of buying yourself time to get some more development in. Instead of immediately going with the c5 move at this moment here, the position is now opening up at a moment where it is actually white who is ever so slightly ahead in development. There is already this direct connection between the rooks. Having a little bit more of a reserved approach, a little more modest approach with c6, knowing full well that the knight should not capture the pawn. It is poisoned because of queen c7, and there are issues due to the unprotected nature of the white queen. Rook a c1, rook a c8, there's an issue for this white knight. Can't take the pawn is the short story. After rook a to c1, black would play rook a to c8, and next maybe get a move like queen e7 in, a developing move. Maybe even then find time to make a flight square for the black king. Maybe only at that point can black next look for a c5 break. Only after there was just a tiny bit more of a build-up within the black position. Again, little details, but they add up. Okay, in the game, what did we have? It was an immediate pawn break, an immediate strike at the white center with c5. D takes, knight takes, and yeah, this is of course the, well not of course, but this is the better way to take. When you consider the two minor pieces that could take on c5, it's better to take with the knight. He's improved by 1 rank. He's getting out of the rook's view. He's also looking to next improve further, get into the e4 square. Oh, knight d3. This is one of the ideas when combating an isolated pawn. The side, white in this case, battling against the isolated pawn. Good general principle is to welcome some exchanges. The more exchanges in the position, the better it is for white when combating the isolated pawn. The isolated pawn tends to become more of a weakness as more pieces are traded. So, knight d3 welcomes a knight exchange. Well, also, the knight was threatened. So, knight d3, black does not comply with minor piece exchanges, instead goes in for knight e4. If you capture the knight, well, you're giving up an extremely valuable minor piece who really should take good care over these light squares on the king side. So we're really never going to have bishop takes knight. Rook a c1, rook a c8, queen b1, queen e7. It's just a slight pull for white. Anything significant? No. I mean, we're talking something that's not even quite at the half pawn advantage for white. It's reading right now about 0.47, just to give you a feel. Bishop d4, just getting some small improvements in here. b5, getting out of the bishop's way. b4, starting to eye up the c5 square. This might be a jumping point for a minor piece. That's one way to look at it. It's also stopping black from maybe advancing some on the queen side, grabbing some space. And remember that earlier mentioned c3 square? At some point, maybe black could take advantage of the a3 and c3 square due to that b3 move. Well, maybe connected with a black pawn on b4, a knight c3 move at some stage may come to mind. b4 stops b4 by black and eyes up the c5 square. Knight d7, a3, just reinforcing b4. This knight is kind of following in this knight's footsteps. This knight was not long ago on the e6 square. He went to c5 and then e4. Bishop a1. Opening up the d4 square. Maybe it's the knight who wants to jump there at some stage. Knight d4 into f5. This would be a strong square. Maybe pick up the dark square bishop. Knight e6. Queen a2. Bishop c7. And knight d4, bishop b6, h4. This is an important moment in the game. Very important moment in the game. This last move, h4, move 29. First off, why h4 of all moves? Why are we going with h4? Can we not do better here? It's difficult to. There will come a time in a game, and I believe this is one of them, where you really can't improve the quality and improve the position of your pieces any further. And so you look to maybe make a break on one side of the board or another, make some pawn advance to crack at your opponent's structure. H4 is not the only move. There's maybe, well, not the only move to consider, but there's maybe also the move H4 to put some pressure on B5. This is an idea, something else to consider. When you look at the pieces, the knights, the queen, the bishop, we already have a rook on an open file. Moving this light square bishop, it's not much of an improvement. If you're moving him, it's tough to improve the pieces. It's a position that really calls for some pawn advance or some pawn break. The idea behind H4 is to maybe press further with H5. Given time, maybe play H6 and make the heart of Black's kingside structure flinch. I don't believe Black would allow that to happen. As soon as H5 is played, Black would probably stop that pawn cold, but the idea here is to maybe induce some weakness in the Black camp. Now, after H4, Black is up, of course, Black's move here. Can you spot what Black does next? Let me throw it to you. Can you spot a tactic in this position? So, throwing it at you. If you'd like to, go ahead, pause the video, see if you can spot a tactic in this position for Black. Okay, the move played in the game was knight takes g3. Did you find that? Did you calculate this well? Let's see. What is played next? F takes g3. Knight takes knight. Bishop takes knight. Bishop takes bishop. Pawn takes bishop. Pretty forcing line here. Queen e3 check. That material that was invested capturing on g3 is, guess what? Going to be won back by Black. What do you do here? Queen to f2. The knight is captured and the material is won back. So, did White blunder here with h4? No. It was Black who actually blundered. Knight takes g3 is a blunder. There was a serious miscalculation by Black going for this move. Knight takes g3 is a blunder. It is certainly, when you see a move like h4, capturing on these squares, trying to take advantage of the weakness of the last move, h4, what does that do? What is one of the things that it does? It weakens g3. Can we take advantage of this g3 square is a question that you may want to think about. White goes for this, pounces on g3, but it's not working out. Black did not clearly miss something, maybe did not calculate deep enough. Why is this a blunder? Let's find out. F takes was played, knight takes knight, bishop takes knight, bishop takes bishop, pawn takes bishop, and after the queen gives a check, White plays queen f2. If the knight blocks, by the way, that would drop the rook. Queen f2, however, of course, blocks the check. After queen takes knight, guess who has the last laugh? Rook c7. This was not just the block of a check when queen f2 was played. It is also throwing a very important punch at f7. Connected with White's last move now, rook c7. This is game over for Black. The bishop is hit, who is unprotected, and White simply threatens a mate in 1, 2. Game over for Black. They didn't resign yet, but they miscalculated with this knight takes g3 line. What was played next is f5. defending the mate and 2 threat. White scoops up the bishop. h6. Bishop takes, king there, bishop back, rook e2, bishop f1. Black throws in the towel, resigns. Yeah, what are you going to do here? You take the queen, queens are exchanged, white's up a piece. It's just an unfortunate miscalculation by Nakamura right here with knight takes g3. Something was overlooked. I guess that follow-up idea of rook to c7 and this mate on f7 was overlooked. So very abrupt end to this one. A lot of subtleties going on earlier, and then it's the right idea. I don't know if I should say right idea, but again, when you see a move like this, h4, trying to take advantage of the weakness, something to consider. But in this case, these tricks or these sacrifices on g3 simply weren't working in the end. Again, white has this, threw a pig on the 7th, hit the bishop, threatened the mate in 2, and yeah, was just overlooked by black, and they ended up resigning just a few moves later. Anyhow, with that, Karjakin, after round 2, is tied for the lead with 1.5 points. Him and Anand. We'll see what happens. Still a long tournament to go, 14 rounds. As usual, feel free to leave any feedback in the comments section below to this video. And as usual, I hope you got something out of it. That's all for now. Take care. Bye.